Previously on Five Nights at Freddy's Season 1. The tragic history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza didn't end with the death of Cece Afton, or with the 4 children who went missing in 1985. Just as Charlie Emily arrives in Hurricane, Utah to expose the restaurant's dark history, the Freddy's night guard, Ralph, vanishes without a trace, murdered by the vile animatronic band. Though Ralph's ex-wife lobbies the police to investigate Freddy's, Chief Burke is more concerned with the storm that Charlie could bring to town, as is her childhood friend Marla Alderman, who is knee-deep in her own covert investigation. Unbeknownst to the shady Freddy's manager, the new night guard has motivations of his own and uses his position to examine the semi-sentient animatronics in the hopes of reaching the spirits of the missing children and possibly setting them free. We open the same way as last time, with hands and paper, except this time the hands are smaller and the papers are drawings. Little hands are tracing crayons across blank pieces of paper, drawing familiar scenes of children and animals, specifically a bear, a chicken, a purple rabbit, and a pirate fox. We montage through several drawings, realizing through this process that the hands belong to Abby. She finishes up the last drawing, then tapes it to the wall, which we now see is full of dozens of similar crayon drawings. Abby moves out of frame and we truck in on the final picture. A yellow bear in a black top hat holding hands with a blonde boy and a dark-haired girl in a black and white striped dress. The girl is labeled Charlie, and even though it's spelled wrong, we can see that the boy is labeled Cassidy. We roll the opening titles. This time, the arcade cabinet plays an 8-bit video of a purple man with a badge, first walking around harmlessly, then being attacked by the headliners. He runs off and finally escapes them, but he's jump-scared by Foxy, who bites his head in half. After the logo comes the episode title, Chapter 3, Free Roaming Mode. We open in a college classroom, very functional, minimalist. The students are all in their early 20s, dressed like it's the early 90s. The professor is Dr. Amy Treadwell, 59, short red hair going white, wearing a lab coat. She is giving a lecture, pointing to diagrams on the chalkboard with her teacher's stick. She tells the class today they'll be talking about animatronics, and asks who can define an animatronic. One of the students says an animatronic is like a robot, but fully mechanical with no computer input. Dr. Treadwell says animatronics are mechanical puppets, artificial creatures, but not artificial intelligence, created via mechatronics using actuators where a true robot would use servos. Dr. Treadwell grabs a photo and tapes it to the board, asking the class who recognizes the character within. None of them raise their hand. She then tapes up a second photo and asks again. A few hands are raised, including that of Charlie Emily. Dr. Treadwell says the first character is the Hatbox Ghost from Disney's Haunted Mansion ride, and the second is Chuck E. Cheese of the eponymous children's restaurant. Now, she says, taping a third photo to the board, who can tell me who this is? The class says nothing. We angle on Charlie, clearly conflicted. Right as she opens her mouth to speak, someone else replies, Freddy Fazbear. Charlie looks over, surprised, to see it was Lamar. Dr. Treadwell says that's correct. She goes on to explain that Freddy Fazbear is the face of a children's restaurant similar to Chuck E. Cheese's, but hardly known outside its hometown. One student raises their hand and says his little sister used to watch the Freddy's cartoon back home in Utah, but he didn't know it was a restaurant. Treadwell says she doesn't know anything about a cartoon. She asks Lamar if he knows what makes Freddy special, and Lamar says he's more advanced than Chuck E. Cheese or any of Disney's animatronics. Treadwell says that's correct and attributes Freddy's success to the genius of one man, Henry Emily, a former classmate of hers. Not only are the animatronics capable of moving in randomized motions, but according to some people she found who went to Freddy's, they're even capable of walking around on their own and avoiding objects. She says she hoped to discuss the Freddy's animatronics makeup, but no one she reached was willing to discuss the company's secrets. So today they'll be discussing possible answers to what makes the animatronics so advanced, assuming any of the rumors are true. After all, they have with them a connection to Freddy's, Henry Emily's daughter. She indicates Charlie and asks quietly if she's still okay with talking about this, and Charlie says, yes, why wouldn't she be? Treadwell gives her a sympathetic look, then asks the class how they think Henry built his robots. We truck in on Charlie, drawing into herself. Back to the present, the morning of day 3. Charlie, John, and Marla sit in a booth in Sparky's. John wears his work uniform, Marla doesn't. Charlie says they have to break into Freddy's. Marla says no. Charlie says it's the only way to figure out how the animatronics work. Marla says Charlie doesn't care about Lamar's dissertation. She just wants to figure out why her dad killed himself. Charlie snaps that she knows why. Guilt over the missing children incident. She's here to figure out the secrets of Freddy's that everyone in Hurricane seems too complacent or complicit to bother with. Marla, angry, asks if she really thinks she's smarter than everyone else here and that it hadn't occurred to anyone else to question the official story. Charlie says if she really wanted to know, she would break into Freddy's. Marla snaps that she's actually trying to be smart and mature, not impulsive, and Charlie says that's because she doesn't actually care. Charlie still doesn't know that one of the MCI kids was Marla's brother, but Marla isn't about to explain that. She gets up and leaves without a word. Dunn enters Sparky's, shooting a suspicious look at Charlie and John, then sits at the bar. Anne appears and almost kisses him, but he holds her back, looking around nervously as if they're being watched, then asks if they can go somewhere else. A moment later, they exit the back door of the diner. Delilah is standing there, not smoking or anything, just lurking. Jay tells Anne that he took another look at the Freddy's files, and he found something funny. There were no documents about the MCI, or anything between 1985 and 1991. Anne asks what about the Bonnie sketch, and Jay says all those were from the MCI files. The Freddy's files are missing everything from 1994 to 1992. The older cops are definitely hiding something. Anne asks what they should do, and Jay says he's going to ask Chief Burke. He's the smartest guy Jay knows. He must have the answers. Anne says if the cops are hiding something from Jay, wouldn't Clay be a part of that? Jay is conflicted, but ultimately decides no, he doesn't think Clay would keep secrets from him. John leaves Sparky's to find Marla leaning on his car, smoking and looking angry. He tells her they all need to work together to figure out the truth, and Marla says she's been doing just fine all along. John says, sure, but has she actually found anything? Marla tells him he can do whatever he wants, but she's not going to risk exposing herself to Fazbear Entertainment. John questions if there even is a Fazbear Entertainment anymore. Most people in town think the one last Freddy's is just a front for something. Marla says they're a front for evil and debauchery, like they always have been, and if Charlie's not careful, she's gonna end up like, you know. Carlton walks by them on his way into Sparky's, just nodding in acknowledgement. That's exactly it, John says. Charlie has all the answers, even if she doesn't know it. Marla asks if John knows something she doesn't, and he says no, but he's invested now. Marla tosses out her cigarette and asks if she can borrow the car to pick up Jessica. Clay arrives at the police station, and Jay shows him the Freddy's files laid out in the conference room. Clay says he just wanted the files on Henry Emily. Jay says he figured that included Freddy's. Clay asks if he found out the name of the current night guard, and Jay says he doesn't think it's in any of these documents. Clay patiently says that's why he should call and ask. Jay asks what they're looking for, and Clay says again he just needs the name of the night guard. We get the feeling Clay is just giving Jay busy work. Clay asks if there's something Jay wants to ask him, which is pretty clear from his body language, and Jay finally admits he saw the police sketch of Bonnie. He asks if Bonnie did the MCI, and Clay says no, Jay, an animatronic rabbit did not kidnap 4 children. It was a man in a rabbit costume. It was Scott Chipper in a rabbit costume, specifically. Jay asks why no one knows Chipper wore a rabbit suit, and Clay says he wasn't the chief when the MCI happened, but he knows Freddy's was untouchable back then. At the height of its popularity, Freddy's was intrinsically tied to the economy of Hurricane. To tear down one would be to tear down the other. Clay turns to leave, but Jay psychs himself up and asks about the 7 years of missing Freddy's documents. Clay shoots him a hard look. Just do what I ask, he says. There's plenty of cases to worry about now without trying to poke holes in something that happened years ago. Clay leaves, and Jay starts looking through the documents. A moment later, he pokes his head out the door, doesn't see Clay, and leaves. Jay finds a fellow police officer in the break room. He makes small talk with him before finally asking if he worked here in 1985. The other cop says no, he was in school. He signed up in 1988 when they were doing that whole accelerated training program thing. Jay asks what he means, and the cop says he doesn't really remember the program, but back in 1988, Hurricane was desperate for more cops, so they waived a lot of the training procedures. Jay asks if anyone else was hired then, and the cop says he doesn't know. Jen sits at her patio table, smoking a cigarette. On the table in front of her sits a metal helmet, an unpainted prototype for Chica's head. Charlie comes out the back door, surprised to see Jen smoking. Jen says she picks up a pack here and there. Charlie says she saw a police cruiser leaving Jen's driveway, and Jen says it was Clay Burke, just stopping in for a social call. Charlie hesitates, wanting to push the issue, but decides against it. She sits down with Jen, and after a minute, she says she knows her presence stresses her out, but she hopes she can stay out of the way. Jen says she's more worried when Charlie is out of the way. Henry used to stress her out, but at least she always knew where he was. Charlie takes a cigarette from Jen's pack, and though she looks dubious, Jen lights it for her. She says she shouldn't be surprised that Charlie doesn't cough. She's always been a rebel. Charlie says she thought she was always a goody two-shoes, but her foster father smokes. Jen says it's a nasty habit and the world would be better if cigarettes were never invented. Too many people get caught up in the habit when they're young and they spend the rest of their lives fighting its grip on them. We get the feeling Jen isn't really talking about cigarettes. Charlie says she knows about the missing children. Jen says she doesn't want to talk about it. No one talks about it. Charlie asks if she believes Chipper did it. Jen lashes out, saying it's not for her own sake she doesn't want to talk about it. She can't have Charlie getting lost in her father's legacy. Jen says she lost Henry years before he died. The moment he partnered with William Afton, his fate was sealed. Charlie says she's always thought Henry's secret will would include his shares of Fazbear Entertainment, and if she found it, she would use those shares to stop all the evil forces behind Freddy's. Charlie is dropping hints, hoping that Jen will admit to having the will, but Jen doesn't reply. After a moment, she turns the Chica head on its top and ashes her cigarette into the open neck hole. In the small-town Hurricane grocery store, Jessica Appleton, 21, Hispanic, bleach blonde hair, very fashionable, wearing mainly pink, sets a pink boombox on the register and hits play. She jumps up to stand on the counter as the boombox starts playing the Go-Go's We Got the Beat. To the amusement of the drab and middle-aged shoppers, Jessica starts dancing groovily all by herself. She's the fastest moving and brightest colored thing in the store, if not the town. Some of the nearby shoppers start clapping along to the music, and Jessica's dancing becomes more exaggerated. Marla appears nearby, holding 2 cans, and casually asks Jessica if she wanted black beans or pinto. Still dancing, Jessica says pinto. Marla goes to check out with the cashier at the other register, who's apparently unaffected by the scene Jessica is creating. Jessica keeps dancing, and the shoppers keep clapping along. In the Alderman living room, Dottie is slowly eating scrambled eggs from a tray. Sitting nearby is Anna Maria Appleton, 39, Hispanic, in really good shape, Hannah's sister-in-law and Jessica's mother. She's also eating eggs, and the 2 women sit in silence for a while. Finally, Dottie speaks. "I'm going to the memorial." Anna Maria is surprised to hear her talk. "The crying child is a man," Dottie says. Anna Maria asks what she means, and Dottie reiterates that she's going to the memorial. Anna Maria asks if she really thinks that's a good idea. Dottie doesn't reply. After a moment, Anna Maria nods and says she'll talk to Marla about it. Lamar goes into the Hurricane library and asks if they have any books about the history of Hurricane. The young librarian, Harriet Shelley, 24, says they should have some town histories written 100 years ago, and Lamar suggests something a little more recent. Harriet is immediately suspicious, and Lamar throws caution to the wind. He's looking for info about Freddy Fazbear's. The librarian says they don't have anything. Lamar says he knows people don't like to talk about it, but this is important. Harriet says no, he doesn't understand. They don't have anything. They used to have some microfilms, but they got misplaced somehow. Like, all of them? Lamar asks. Uneasy, Harriet says no, just the ones involving Freddy's. Lamar says he's working on a theory about the MCI, and he needs help, something to grasp onto. Harriet looks conflicted, but finally says she'll give him one clue, just because she wants the kids to rest easy. She tells Lamar that in 1987, the MCI kids were quietly reclassified as dead instead of presumed dead, but no one in the police department will explain or acknowledge this. In a storage room at the Hurricane library, Marla sits with Jessica filing her nails and Marla poring over some documents spread out over a card table. The door opens and Harriet enters. Harriet tells them that someone just asked her about Freddy's and describes Lamar. Marla, frustrated, tells them that he's a friend of Charlie's and that neither of them know about the other Freddy's location or the rabbit costume, but both are looking into the MCI with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. This leads to a Seinfeldian discussion of the idiom before Harriet admits that she told Lamar about the reclassification. Marla is angry, asking if Harriet just goes around giving away their investigation, but Harriet says if Lamar has any chance of putting the kids to rest, she had to help him. Isn't that the whole point? Or did Marla just want to solve all the mysteries herself? Marla considers this, knowing there's some truth to the accusation. Finally, she says she can't put it off any longer. It's time to meet Harriet's grandfather. Harriet is unsure. Marla says she's never pushed the issue, but if Harriet doesn't let her talk to her grandfather, they may not figure out the truth of the MCI before Charlie ruins everything. Harriet looks to Jessica for help, but Jessica sides with Marla, reminding Harriet that Fritz was her cousin too. We have a long take of the playground we saw last episode, still run down and depressing, but this time there are two boys present, one of whom is the blonde boy Charlie keeps seeing. He sits there, staring ahead blankly. The other boy is 8-ish, white, wearing a striped gray shirt and a hoodie with the hood up. He's playing on the jungle gym, silently swinging on the monkey bars and climbing up. At one point he drops down behind the blonde boy and asks if they can leave now. We never leave the long take as the blonde boy says no. The kid with the stripes asks how much longer, and the blonde boy says, "Your mom is already here, but she's not the one who's taking us home." Clay enters the police station and is immediately confronted by Jay, who asks if he's cleared to take a lunch. Clay doesn't care. Jay says he called Freddy's. The new night guard is named Mike Schmidt. Clay looks surprised, but Jay leaves without noticing his expression. Clay picks up the phone. Jay peeks into the break room where former Chief Edison is asleep at the table. Jay jostles him awake and takes a long time getting him to his feet. Jay leads Edison to the front door, telling the receptionist that Edison needs some fresh air. Jay takes him out behind the station, where he finally manages to get him aware. Edison expresses confusion, and Jay says he needs to ask him a question. Edison is half senile and doesn't recognize Jay. Jay asks if Edison knows what happened in 1987, and Edison is surprised that 1987 already happened. Edison asks Jay if he has any gin, and Jay hands him a bottle of water. Edison drinks it, complaining that they don't make gin like they used to. Jay asks Edison if he remembers anything about the missing children incident, and Edison says he can't remember what he had for breakfast. Jay is about to give up, but out of nowhere, Edison says he used to call 1987 the year of the slacker, since everyone quit at the same time. Jay asks what he means, and Edison says something confused and vague about how the entire police force retired at once, everyone but him and that meathead Carrot Top. Jay asks if he means Clay Burke, and Edison says he doesn't think any man should be named Clay. Clay is malleable and easy to manipulate. Charlie and Lamar sit on the rocky ledge outside the garage. Lamar tells Charlie that he heard the MCI kids were reclassified as dead in 1987, 2 years after their disappearance and 5 years before Freddy's reopened. Charlie says that confirms it. Not only are they dead, but the cops know about it. There's no choice now but to break into Freddy's at night. Lamar says he was afraid she would say that, but screw it, he doesn't have a record. John approaches them from the garage, wearing his uniform and wiping oil off his hands. He says fine, he'll do it, but as soon as Clay Burke shows up, he's gone. He had too many run-ins with him in high school. Charlie asks if he's going to tell Marla, and he says no. She then asks if he's going to actively lie to her or just omit the facts. This could change their plans. John looks unsure. In the evening, Marla returns home alone. Anna Maria and Dottie are eating TV dinners in front of the TV. Anna Maria greets Marla and Dottie mumbles something in recognition. Marla asks if Hannah came by, and Anna Maria says no, why? Marla says she thought she might be mad about Marla telling her to stop coming. Anna Maria says she was a little confused, but not mad. Why did she fire Hannah anyways? Marla says it doesn't matter, it's over. She'd rather just find someone who can watch her mother like a mature adult than punish Hannah for her shortcomings. Marla puts another TV dinner in the microwave. Anna Maria takes Dottie's empty tray and enters the kitchen, asking Marla about Jessica. Marla says she dropped her off at home a few minutes ago. They went by earlier, but they saw... She catches herself. Anna Maria asks what she saw. Marla says, never mind. Point is, Jessica wanted to see Carlton and Sparky's, but now she's back home and Marla's here with Dottie, so Anna Maria can head out and see her daughter now. Anna Maria asks if Marla wants to come to dinner, and Marla says no. Even if she took Dottie too, it would be too much of a hassle. Noting her tone, Anna Maria asks Marla if she's okay. Marla says fine, ripping the plastic off her TV dinner so hard that food goes flying. Anna Maria tells her that Dottie said she wanted to go to the memorial. Marla growls that they shouldn't be having that stupid memorial. Anna Maria says she'd be happy to take Dottie if Marla doesn't want to go. She has to be there just by virtue of being a distant relative of the deceased. While Anna Maria is talking, Marla lets out a gasp of emotion, like the start of a good cry, but she doesn't follow through. Looking overwhelmed, Marla slides down the front of the counters until she's sitting on the floor. Anna Maria crouches next to her, asking what's wrong, seeming genuinely empathetic, a stark contrast to her sister-in-law. She asks if it's about Jeremy. Marla, losing her cool but not quite crying, says no, it's everything. Jeremy, her mom, her dad. She admits she knows her dad is still in town, but she doesn't know where or why he's avoiding them, especially since he's still paying their bills. And now Charlie's in town, and she's gonna get herself killed. She's not the same girl Marla was best friends with as a kid, and she's going to ruin everything Marla's been working towards. Anna Marie asks what she's been working towards, then realizes she's not still working on those conspiracy theories about Freddy's, right? Marla says she needs to, because no one else will. Everyone in town just walks around in a daze as if they don't know what happened. And as soon as the cops see Charlie poking around, they'll double down on their cover-up and Marla will never find out what really happened to Jeremy. Anna Maria comforts Marla, telling her she's here to help, and now Jessica is too. And hey, she still has John, right? Marla reacts negatively to her boyfriend's name, saying she knows he lies to her, and it's getting worse with Charlie here. Anna Maria asks if she thinks John is cheating on her with Charlie, and Marla says why the hell wouldn't he? She's one of the only people who ever escaped Hurricane, and now she's back, and she's cute, and she's flirty, and she's like some kind of crazy fairy fantasy woman. She doesn't have a dead brother or a disappearing dad or a mom who could barely even talk. She's in college learning how to build robots, not working a dead-end job just to feed her mother TV dinners. Anna Maria hugs Marla and tells her she knows John pretty well. She's spent a lot of time with his dad. She doesn't think John would ever cheat on Marla. But if he did, then it would mean he was blind to the fact that Charlie's carefree attitude is only possible because she doesn't have the weight of the world on her shoulders. Without too clearly ripping off Breaking Bad, we imply the passage of time with the desert scene of the sun setting super sped up. We then do a tracking shot of Inside Freddy's, also sped up. The curtain periodically opens and the headliners go through their routine, but only a few kids come through. After dark, behind Freddy's, Donnie props open the back door to carry a bag of trash to the dumpster. He does a double take when he notices Lamar lurking in the woods, gesturing to him anxiously. Donnie crosses the back lot, and Lamar berates him for not meeting at their scheduled time. Donnie doesn't know what he's talking about. Behind Donnie, Charlie darts over to the back door and slips inside. Lamar tells Donnie that Jessica was all dolled up and ready to meet him, but he missed his chance. Donnie is confused and says he just saw Jessica a minute ago. Lamar tries to cover his ass, but Donnie says he doesn't think Lamar really knew Jessica at all. He was just trying to use Donnie. Lamar tries to protest that he and Donnie are basically friends at this point, but Donnie dramatically declares that Lamar is just one in a long line of people who use him for their own means, then abandon him on the sidewalk like trash, he suddenly yells, turning and punching the dumpster hard. He cries out in pain. Lamar dubiously asks if he's alright. Donnie weakly says, yes, he's alright. The pain inside will always be worse. Out front, Mike is just coming in for his shift. He settles into the office as the dead-eyed teenaged employees leave. Mike grabs his flashlight and cattle prod and pokes around while the lights are still on, checking on the animatronics, still in their places, and peeking his head into the men's room. He almost goes in the women's room, then thinks better of it and knocks first, asking if anyone's in there. No response, so he shines his flashlight inside, then moves on. A moment later, Charlie pokes her head out. Mike settles into the office and puts in Ralph's Night 3 tape. Donnie comes in and Mike asks if he's heading out, but Donnie looks reflective and asks Mike if he's ever been in love. Out back, John has joined Lamar in his lurking. John asks if they're sure there isn't an alarm on the back door, and Lamar says Charlie already left through the back, when she abandoned him to the cops. John says that sucks. He knows Clay Burke can be a hard ass, even more so now that he's the chief. He once busted John and his friend for underage drinking, which, in hindsight, they shouldn't have been doing in a public park. John asks Lamar about Charlie. Are they together? Lamar says no. He thought she was cute when they first met, but he started talking to her because he was more interested in her father's work, and before he could make a move, he realized she had become his best friend. He asks if John has a thing for Charlie, and John says she had a crush on him when they were kids, but he always thought she was just a little nuisance. Lamar points out that they're not kids anymore. John says yeah. After a moment, Lamar remembers that John is with Marla, and John says yeah, he is. The door opens behind them and Charlie pops out, but before she can speak, an alarm goes off. In the office, Donnie is waxing poetic when they're startled by the alarm. Mike looks at the CCTVs. The animatronics are all still in their places, but he sees Lamar running in through the back. Mike stands up, telling Donnie to leave. Donnie asks if he should help, and Mike says no, go home now, he'll deal with it. Out back, Lamar disappears inside as the parking lot is flooded with flashing blue lights. Charlie freezes, but John tells her to go in. She says, "What about him?" rattling on about how he could get in a lot of trouble. John grabs her shoulders. They share a moment of charged eye contact and pushes her inside. The door locks behind her, and as the blue lights turn off, a flashlight beam appears on John. Inside, Lamar yells that he thought there was no alarm, and Charlie yells that there wasn't yesterday. They both say, "Follow me," at the same time and run off in different directions. Mike leaves the office, and we see Bonnie and Chica start to move. Lamar runs into Pirate's Cove, where the curtain is still on the floor. Foxy stands on his stage, his remaining foot secure, but his other leg flailing around along with his arms and jaw. Lamar approaches Foxy, carefully, blown away by his movements. Charlie appears in the other door and freezes, clapping a hand to her mouth. Foxy turns to look at her, his single eye sparking. Lamar points out how amazing Foxy is, and Charlie just stares as Foxy manages to free his remaining foot from the latch and stumble down to the floor. As he does, Charlie sees, for a single frame, the image of a little boy superimposed over Foxy. "Run," Charlie whispers as Foxy steps towards her. "What?" Lamar calls across the room. "Run!" Charlie yells, turning and running away. Lamar does as he's told, running in the opposite direction. Outside, the flashlight holder approaches John, and we see that it's Clay Burke in his police windbreaker. Clay greets him by name, looking grim. John smiles sheepishly, and Clay asks if Charlie Emily is in there. John says he responded to that alarm pretty quick. Surely he wasn't just sitting in his cruiser waiting for something to happen. Clay tells him to stop screwing around. They both know what will happen if Charlie finds what she's looking for. Charlie runs into the dark hallway, and one of the broken lights flashes on to reveal Chica standing at the far end. She starts trudging towards Charlie. Charlie turns around and is jump-scared by the little blonde boy she saw outside Jen's. John says he won't confirm or deny anything. Clay can arrest him for trespassing in an empty parking lot, technically, but he can't go inside Freddy's without a warrant. Clay asks if John actually doesn't know the point of an alarm. He's going around to the front door, and John can either go home or come with him in handcuffs. John asks if Clay knows who the new security guard is. Clay says he can make an educated guess. John asks if he thinks the guard really wants him there. Clay says better him than Charlie Emily. Charlie asks the blonde boy who he is. He stares at her, looking like he has a lot on his shoulders, and finally says, "Follow the blackbird." Charlie just stares at him. The kid's expression doesn't change as he says, "Abby is the key." "What does that mean?" Charlie yells, nearly panicked. Chica looms behind her, her beak opening and her arms reaching to either side, one of them with her platter and cupcake still attached. The cupcake's jaw is open like a claw. Just before Chica grabs her, someone yells, "Sammy!" Charlie looks up to see Mike running towards her as the blonde kid vanishes. Mike throws something at Charlie and she catches it, the cattle prod. She turns just in time, jabbing Chica in the stomach. Chica is startled, but not affected. In the brief pause, Charlie rethinks her strategy and stabs the tip under Chica's head right into her endoskeleton. Sparks fly out of Chica's eye sockets and run down the exposed metal between her exoskeleton parts. The cupcake's jaw flaps open and shut, its eyes rolling around. Finally, Chica falls backwards, crashing to the floor, where she lays still and steaming. Charlie stands over her, panting in shock. Mike comes up behind her and says, "Good job." Startled, Charlie whips around and brandishes the cattle prod at him. Lamar enters the arcade and heads for the foyer, but he hears Foxy's mumbly pirate song played through an ancient voice box somewhere outside the arcade. Lamar drops and crawls under the nearest pinball machine, watching from below as Foxy's bare endoskeleton foot and ankle patter by in front of him. As quietly as possible, Lamar scoots behind the pinball machine, then behind the arcade cabinet beside it. He cries out and covers his head as the pinball machine explodes. Foxy dug his hook into the glass and pulled it aside. Lamar scoots behind the next cabinet as Foxy destroys the first. Outside, John tells Clay he's not getting into Freddy's. Not tonight. Clay is furious, saying he of all people shouldn't test him on this. Hurricane has finally resumed some sense of normalcy, and Charlie's presence threatens to tear that apart. John says he doesn't care about Hurricane, or the people who made themselves complicit by refusing to talk about what happened. If Clay wasn't going to figure out the truth, then of course Charlie would come back to do it herself. Mike gets Charlie to calm down and lower the cattle prod. He explains that the electric shock shorts out the animatronic servos, which is only possible because they're fully electronic, but she already knew that. Still recovering, she says her name is Charlie. He says he knows. She told him when she pulled up in the dark like Michael Myers. Then why did he call her Sammy? Mike looks unsure for a moment, then walks past her to crouch down next to Chica, still steaming. "I wasn't talking to you," he says. Charlie stares down at Chica, realization on her face. So it's true, she says. The missing kids. Speaking of missing kids, Mike says, didn't you have someone with you? Charlie's eyes go wide and she runs away, still holding the cattle prod. John tells Clay that Charlie deserves to know the truth. He's not going to tell her, but he's not going to stop her from finding out on her own either. Clay says John has no idea the kind of stuff that's gone on behind the scenes at Freddy's, or the kind of shit show that Charlie could inadvertently release onto Hurricane. What if it was Carlton? John asks. Or Abby? What if you were driven to suicide and the entire world ganged up to stop your kids from finding out why? Clay hesitates. Maybe you wouldn't want them to find out, John continues, but it wouldn't be your choice or anyone else's. Charlie has the right to know. Just then, the muffled alarm deactivates and John gestures to the door. There goes your probable cause. Clay thinks for a long time, then shoots John a dirty look and walks back towards the woods. A moment later, he turns back, shining his flashlight back on John. Don't come crawling back to me when this spirals out of control, he says. Because if your little theory is correct, you're going to be first on his list. Foxy tears another arcade cabinet out of the wall, exposing Lamar, who crawls behind the next one. Foxy grabs it and pulls, but the cords stick, and he struggles for a second before the cords snap and the arcade cabinet falls. Lamar clocks the ripped cords, their frayed wires sparking. Foxy bears down on Lamar, raising his hook to strike, and in the last second, Lamar grabs the cords and jams them into Foxy's stomach, right through one of the many holes in his exoskeleton. Electricity runs through Foxy, more visible than in Chica, and his eye patch flips up, revealing an empty hole. He falls backwards, hitting the ground hard, and with a nasty crack, his head detaches from his body. Several small flames appear on his cloth skin. Lamar sits there, panting, as Charlie runs in, brandishing the cattle prod. She takes in the situation, then grabs a nearby fire extinguisher, aiming it at Foxy and pulling the trigger. A little bit of dry foam flops out. Charlie tosses it aside and stomps out the fires on Foxy with her boot, then helps Lamar to his feet. Mike enters and rushes to Foxy's side, snapping at the kids for hurting him. Lamar protests that Foxy was trying to kill him. What the hell kind of family-friendly joint is this? Mike picks up Foxy's head and examines his neck. We should be able to fix him, he says. Just needs a couple new bolts. Fix him? Lamar cries. Then what, you're gonna Frankenstein John Wayne Gacy back together? John Wayne Gacy's still alive, Mike says. And so's Foxy, no thanks to you. We have to keep his parts together. Lamar asks why, and Charlie tells him solemnly that he already knows, her expression implying the truth. Seriously? Lamar asks. He lets out a breath. That's a big pill to swallow. How else could they walk around like that? Charlie says. Lamar says he just thought her dad was a super genius. Charlie says he was, but not enough to build robots capable of autonomous movement. Not without a little help from the other side. John is alone out front when Charlie appears and opens the door. She blocks him from coming in, nervously glancing over her shoulder and saying she's not sure he wants to come in. John cheerily asks if they're walking around, per the local rumors. His demeanor marks a clear shift from when he was talking to Clay. Charlie says yes, but it's more than that. John says he'll risk it. Charlie says no, he doesn't get it. The animatronics are out for blood. John says he decided to help her. He may have jeopardized his relationship to help her, and he's going to keep doing it. He sees Bonnie down the hallway, and before Charlie can react, John pushes her inside, grabbing her hand and running for it. Charlie and John meet Lamar and Mike just entering the office. Mike sets Foxy's head on the desk. When they're all inside, Mike hits the door buttons and they slam down, startling Lamar. Mike says, yeah, he wasn't sure why they were necessary either. Charlie says, no, that's not true, is it? Mike knows something about Freddy's. This job didn't just fall out of the sky for him. Mike plays dumb, asking if she really thinks he would sign up for this. Charlie says he would, if he was looking for answers like she is. Lamar points out that she finally admitted it, and she says, yeah, duh. She wants to help him, but obviously she has other things on her mind than his dissertation. Lamar says he just wishes she had been honest. Charlie reminds him that he decided not to tell her about the MCI, and he retorts that he was waiting for the right time. Mike hits the light button, illuminating the dark office window. Bonnie is standing right outside, and they all jump. Mike says they can't keep the doors shut all night, since management has throttled the electricity, and it takes more power to keep them shut since they're electronically reinforced. Lamar asks why the hell they throttled the electricity, and John says money laundering. He's only half kidding. Lamar says that's fine, the electricity won't be a problem, as long as someone has a screwdriver. A few minutes later, Lamar has the control modules open and he's screwing with the wires. I wanted to get into computers, he says absently, programming and stuff. But my parents said computers aren't going anywhere and I should be an engineer. We compromised with robotics, which is probably the least profitable of the three if we're being honest. The others aren't listening to him. Charlie sits on the desk next to Foxy's head, Mike is rotating his chair back and forth, and John is just standing there. Charlie tells Mike he looks familiar, and Mike says that's confirmation bias. She's looking for crazy mysteries and clues. She asks if he's related to Michael Afton, and he says what, because they have the same first name? Maybe the most common name for white guys? She says she's starting to think that everything's connected in Hurricane. Maybe not because of destiny, just because of how the world works. Mike says that's too metaphysical for him, he's just the security guard. But people like her need to understand that if they try to read into every little thing, they'll just drive themselves crazy. John asks Mike why the animatronics are trying to kill them, and Mike gives him a weird look, asking if he really wants to talk about that. John says yes, they should all know. Mike says he thinks the MCI kidnapper may have been disguised as a Freddy security guard and killed the missing children near the animatronics, or even stuffed them inside, which kids used to spread rumors about even before the MCI. All Mike can do is speculate, but he imagines they're out to avenge themselves by killing night guards. After all, Mike only got this job because the last guy went missing. Charlie says Scott Chipper wouldn't have worn a uniform, he was the CEO, and John wonders if Chipper even was the killer. Mike gives him a withering look. Lamar says he's rerouted the electricity. The rest of the building might run out, but the doors won't. He says he wants to take a look at Foxy, but just as he's reaching for his head, Foxy's eye moves and his jaw starts snapping. Lamar grabs the cattle prod and shocks Foxy back into submission. Mike yells at him, saying there's a dead child in there, and Lamar says he won't do it again, then rips Foxy's face off. Mike throws up his hands in annoyance and stalks off across the small office. Lamar starts poking at the exposed metal of Foxy's head. How'd he get like this anyways? He asks. Poor guy needs a fur job. John reminds him that they don't need to keep the place child safe if Fazbear Entertainment is really laundering money. Charlie is staring at Mike and finally asks if he's sure he's not Michael Afton. Mike says he thinks he would know if his father was a British mad scientist. Charlie notes that he knows who William Afton is, and Mike says yeah, obviously. Charlie asks why he won't admit he has some kind of plan here, and Mike says everyone should do their due diligence when they get a new job. And what about you? Mike asks. You're the one who keeps poking around a kid's restaurant. Where'd you say you live? Oregon? And you came all this way just to play Nancy Drew? She's helping me write my dissertation about her dad, Lamar says, still screwing with Foxy. Or she said she was. Now I don't know what the hell she's up to. It's none of your business, John tells Mike. She's allowed to be curious about her father's legacy. No, Mike says. I want to know. What did you expect to find here? Charlie looks like she's debating internally. Mike and John stare at her, and Lamar turns around to look. Answers, she says. To what? Mike asks. To me, Charlie says. To everything. To why my dad did what he did. Why my mom left him and immediately dropped me in foster care in a different state. I barely remember anything before I was with my foster parents, and what I do remember is just a few pieces that feel like they all came from different puzzles. It's like I've lived a bunch of different lives, and I don't remember any of them. I thought if I finally came back to Hurricane, everything would just kind of sort itself out. But all I found so far is a whole new pile of information that hasn't made anything more clear. Did my dad kill himself because of the missing kids? Maybe. But does that confirm or debunk the very, very disturbing theory that's been on my mind ever since I heard what happened? What theory? Lamar asks. Charlie just says, I came here for myself, but now I'm here for my dad, at least as long as I know I can still call him Dad. But why now? Mike asks. You just happened to come back right when I'm starting here? And right before Cece's memorial? John adds. Charlie considers for a while, then reaches into her jacket and pulls out an envelope, handing it to Mike. It's addressed to Charlotte Emily, Mailroom, Oregon Institute of Technology. Lamar reads the return address. 310 West State Street, Hurricane. Where is that? You're standing in it, John replies. Charlie explains that the letter arrived anonymously, telling her that Freddy's would be shutting down by year's end, and her last chance to find the answers she's always been looking for would come this November. Lamar asks why she didn't tell him, and she asks if he would have come. Yes, he says, because he cares about his dissertation, and despite the fact that Charlie fails to recognize this, he cares about her too. He turns back to working on Foxy. Charlie says if there's nothing to find in Freddy's, then she's lost. She'll live the rest of her life without even knowing what she's looking for, let alone finding it. There's a moment of silence, then John asks what they do now. Mike hits the play button on the cassette player, and Ralph starts in with his standard, "Hello, Now, Mike says, we hope Lamar's skills are as good as he seems to think. With perfect comedic timing, Lamar gets zapped and cries out.
Hey, you're doing great,
Ralph continues.
Most people don't last this long. I mean, you know, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant.
In Clay Burke's home office, the chief is sitting at his desk and looking through some paperwork. Betty opens the door and asks if he's coming to bed soon. It's past midnight. Clay says yeah, sure, soon. Betty turns to go, but Clay stops her and asks if her appointment yesterday was with Jen Emily. Betty says he knows she can't tell him. Clay says yeah, he knows. Betty hesitates, then asks him wearily if it's happening again. Clay says not if he can help it. He'll burn Fazbear Entertainment to the ground if he has to, even if it means Hurricane falls around it. Betty leaves, and after a moment, Clay stands up and follows her. We truck in on his desk, revealing an old newspaper whose headline reads, "Tragedy at Mascot Diner." The front page photo is the same image of the yellow bear, blood dripping off his muzzle, police swarming around behind him. Back in the Freddy's office, Charlie, Lamar, John, and Mike are trapped and waiting. Lamar is fiddling with Foxy's skull, and Charlie is asleep with her head on the desk. Mike says he can't believe Charlie can sleep at a time like this, even if it is past 2 a.m. Lamar says they should have seen her in geometry. We truck into Charlie's scalp, and suddenly we're in her dream. Her dream world looks identical to the real office. She sits in the chair in front of the CCTVs, alone in the building. We have a POV shot as she looks at the open left door, then the open right door, telepathically activating their respective lights, a clear tribute to the original gameplay. She checks the CCTVs and sees nothing, then she turns around in the chair and is unsurprised to see the 4 animatronics standing in front of her, looking as they did in Scott Chipper's introduction video, more rudimentary with looser skin and rubbery faces. Foxy is fully formed with 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 eyes, no holes, and no pants. Charlie stares at them silently, and when we cut back to the animatronics, there are 4 children standing in front of them. In front of Freddy, a Hispanic boy wearing a top hat, blood trickling down his neck. In front of Bonnie, a black boy wearing paper rabbit ears on a bashed-in head. In front of Chica, a blonde girl wearing a pink striped sweater, jeans with rhinestones, and a DIY Chica bib, a big gash down her torso. In front of Foxy is a child with no head, holding a box under his arm, his shirt covered in bloody stab wounds. Charlie looks at the headless child and says, very calmly, "I'm sorry." The boy opens the front of the box, revealing his severed head, which is wearing an eye patch. His single eye opens, and his severed head speaks. "We have been broken before. Don't lock us away," the Bonnie kid says. "Join us," the Freddy kid says. "Be our friend," the Chica kid says. Charlie looks at the Chica kid and asks if her name is Sammy. She doesn't reply, so Charlie calmly tells the children that Scott Chipper is dead. They can rest easy. In between shots, the scene changes. We're out in the desert now, at the crossroads. Charlie sits in the center, still in the office chair. The 4 children stand on each of the roads. "He will come back," the Bonnie kid says. "He always does," the Freddy kid says. "The man behind the slaughter," the Chica kid says. "But we have a place for him," the Foxy kid's head says. Someone speaks from behind Charlie. "What have you brought home?" She turns around, rotating in the chair, and as she does, the scene changes again, the world around her going completely black. Somehow, Charlie is standing up now, and we can see her fully despite the darkness. A spotlight turns on nearby, revealing Golden Freddy, sitting slumped over on the floor as he was in her previous dream. We cut to Charlie, then cut back. Golden Freddy has been replaced by the blonde boy, sitting in the same slumped over position. As Charlie watches, the blonde kid stands up smoothly, inhumanly, like he's being pulled to his feet by puppet strings. When he's standing up straight, we can see that the floor is gray, but the boy and Charlie stand on a stripe of black and white checkers, bordered in red. We truck in on the blonde boy, moving down the thin checkerboard like train tracks, and the boy seems to look directly into the camera as he recites something in a gravelly voice. "Break and mend, I built the breath. A golden voice will ring. Your life, your aim, save those with soul. Return the changeling." When the boy is done speaking, we fade out into another scene. Charlie again sits in the office chair, but she's now in the main dining room of Freddy's, facing the stage where the 4 children stand in place of the headliners. They all speak at once. "We remember a face like yours." They move to the side to reveal another child who takes center stage. We recognize her from episode 1 as young Charlie, wearing a black and white striped dress. When we cut back to Charlie, she's wearing a white plastic mask resembling a crying mime. We cut back to young Charlie, now wearing the same mask, and truck in on her. When we reach the stage, the girl suddenly lunges for us straight down our line of sight. We fade into the credits with the original Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare sound effect. Mid-credits scene. Charlie, Lamar, Mike, and John are still in the office with the blast doors locked tight. Charlie is asleep, head on the desk. Mike is leaning on the wall, watching the CCTVs. Lamar is asleep on the floor. John is bouncing a squeaky rubber ball against a poster of the headliners, trying to get it right on Freddy's nose. Charlie jerks awake, sputtering her own name. After a moment of surprise, John and Mike laugh. Charlie rubs her eyes and asks if anyone has anything to drink. Mike hands her a bottle of water and she chugs it. John crouches down beside her and asks if she's okay. She says, yeah, duh, she was just sleeping, but she falls silent when she realizes his hands are on hers. Charlie squeezes his hands tight and asks for the names of the MCI kids. Mike tries to interrupt, but she tells him to shut up. With a wary look at Mike, John says he doesn't remember. Charlie pulls her hands away and says fine, if he wants to be like that, he can at least tell her if one of them was named Sammy. John looks alarmed, but suddenly the lights in the office go out. Mike instantly turns on his flashlight just in time to see the door slide open. Bonnie stands just outside the left-hand door.